Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Wasim Ali. I will be the moderator for this webinar. I will pass it on to Tina to get started.
Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. I hope all of you, wherever you are, that you are safe. Today's webinar is intended to address our board's direction to provide flexibility to communities in their districts to address local air pollution concerns. My name is Martina Diaz, but I do go by Tina, and I'm joined by Derek Winters, Din Hua, Adriana Smith, and Scott Rowland. This webinar format is new for us, and we anticipate it will work well, but we do recognize that there may be some challenges along the way. We ask for your patience if this happens. For today's format, we will provide simultaneous English and Spanish presentation, and then we will open up for questions. When we conclude the presentation, I will give more specific details that we all need to follow specifically to address questions. Muy buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a nuestro seminario. Les damos las gracias por participar y esperamos que se encuentren todos ustedes, estén bien y seguros con sus familias. Este seminario de hoy está diseñado para responder la dirección de nuestro consejo de otorgar más flexibilidad a comunidades y a distritos del aire para alinear con problemas locales de polución del aire. Yo soy Tina Díaz y hoy estoy unida con Derek Winters, Din Hua, Adriana Smith y Scott Rowland. El seminario web es un formato que es nuevo para nosotros y anticipamos que todo va a salir bien, pero también es posible que tendremos desafíos durante la sesión. Le pedimos su paciencia si esto sucede. Para el formato de hoy vamos a empezar con una presentación en inglés y simultáneamente vamos a hacerla en español y después abrimos para preguntas. Cuando se concluya y se termine la presentación, les vamos a dar más instrucciones en cómo hacer preguntas. The purpose of our presentation today is to present the framework for stationary source projects that can be funded in areas of the state where districts have received CARB incentive funding. We will also present community identified projects, which are only available to communities selected to develop a community emission reduction program. We will discuss the process that must be followed to fund this type of projects, as outlined in the proposed Chapter 6 that we posted, which will become an additional chapter in the 2019 CARB incentive guidelines. Really, what I want to emphasize for the audience in the takeaway message is that there are 4 key points that we want to highlight today: flexibility, statutory compliance, transparency, and accountability. We really need to hear from the community on what we are presenting today. Our goal is to implement this process as soon as possible. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Adriana Smith.
Hi, Adriana. Before you get started, I just want to make a quick comment. I'm seeing some folks that are not using their audio options. So under the GoToWebinar on the right-hand side, there's an audio pane. If you click on the little left arrow, audio options will come up, and please choose computer audio, or you can call in through the phone. So some of the folks that are not hearing or they're not able to join, please enter the various audio options that you have, either using your speakers through your computer, or there's a number there you can choose to select and join by phone call. So that'll give you audio ability. Thank you for that. Adriana, now you can get started. Give me 1 second to make sure she's unmuted. Adriana, you are self-muted. Go ahead, Adriana.
Thank you, I was self-muted. Buenas tardes y muchas gracias, Tina. Muchas gracias, Tina, por hacer la presentación. Es un placer tenerlos todos aquí participando en el seminario hoy. Yo soy Adriana Moncada Smith, con el Consejo de Recursos del Aire de California, también conocido como CARB, y voy a traducir la presentación en español. El propósito de nuestra presentación es presentar el esquema de proyectos de origen estacionarios que pueden recibir fondos en áreas del estado donde los distritos de aire reciben fondos de incentivos comunitarios de la protección del aire. Hoy también hablaremos sobre los proyectos identificados por la comunidad que solo son disponibles en comunidades seleccionadas para desarrollar programas de reducción de emisiones en la comunidad. También discutiremos el proceso que deben de seguir para financiar estos nuevos tipos de categorías de proyectos, como se indican las directrices de incentivos comunitarios de la protección del aire del 2019. Hay 4 principios fundamentales que queremos resaltar hoy. Y esos incluyen la flexibilidad, el cumplimiento legal, la transparencia y la responsabilidad. Nosotros también necesitamos comentarios de la comunidad en lo que estamos presentando hoy, y nuestra meta es implementar este proceso lo más antes posible. Y con eso le voy a dar el tiempo al señor Derek Winters para que comience el resumen de la presentación. Now I will turn it over to Mr. Derek Winters to start with the overview of the presentation. Next slide.
Thank you, Gianna, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're doing well. To begin the presentation, let's start by giving a quick overview. First, we'll briefly discuss the history of Assembly Bill 617 incentives and what events led up to today. Next, we'll get into the new flexibility to address stationary source projects and community identified projects. We want to be clear. There's a distinction between these two project types. For example, stationary source projects could include stationary diesel engines and air filtration in community centers. As a reminder, stationary source projects are available to air districts that have received community air protection incentives. In contrast, the selected communities with an approved community emission reductions program or those communities under consideration can use the criteria for either stationary source projects or community identified projects to fund air filtration projects at community centers. Community identified projects can include solar panels for residential homes, as we have heard in Shafter's approved SERP, and paving a park, as we have heard in the approved SERP in Imperial. We'll also discuss the goals for the process to develop and fund these projects, as well as the communities, the air districts, and CARB's role in that process. Finally, we'll talk about what will come after this webinar. Next slide.
Empecemos con el resumen de la presentación. Primero que todo, brevemente discutiremos la historia de incentivos por la ley de la Asamblea 617 y los eventos que nos han guiado a hoy. Próximamente discutiremos la flexibilidad nueva de proyectos de origen estacionarios y proyectos identificados por la comunidad. Queremos ser claros que hay una distinción entre estos dos tipos de proyectos. Por ejemplo, proyectos de origen estacionarios podrían incluir motores estacionarios de diésel y filtración de aire en centros comunitarios. Como recordatorio, proyectos de origen estacionarios están disponibles para los distritos de aire que han recibido incentivos comunitarios de la protección del aire. En contraste, las comunidades seleccionadas con un programa de reducción de emisiones de la comunidad aprobado o aquellas comunidades bajo consideración pueden usar los criterios para proyectos de origen estacionaria y proyectos identificados por la comunidad para financiar proyectos de filtración de aire en centros comunitarios. Los proyectos identificados por la comunidad pueden incluir paneles solares para hogares residenciales, como hemos escuchado en el programa de reducción de emisiones en la comunidad de Shafter, y pavimentar un estacionamiento como lo hemos escuchado en el programa de reducciones de emisiones en la comunidad de Imperial. También discutiremos las metas para desarrollar el proceso y financiar estos proyectos, así como el papel de las comunidades, el papel de los distritos de aire y el papel de CARB en este proceso. Finalmente hablaremos sobre lo que vendrá después de este seminario web. Next slide.
AB 617 is a first-of-its-kind legislation that focuses on a community-based approach to improve air quality and reduce exposure in the communities most impacted by air pollution. Along with the passage of AB 617, the legislature also provided funding for incentives to support the reduction goals of AB 617. Initially, only mobile projects were funded through the Carl Moyer and Prop 1B programs. In subsequent years, the funding included stationary source projects and projects that address strategies included in community emission reduction programs. Next slide.
Ahora sigo con nuestro origen. La ley de la Asamblea es la primera legislación de este tipo que usa el método de enfocarse en la comunidad para mejorar la calidad del aire y reducir exposición en las comunidades más afectadas por la contaminación del aire. Junto con la aprobación de la ley de la Asamblea 617, la legislatura también proporcionó financiamiento para incentivos para apoyar las metas de reducción de la Asamblea 617. Inicialmente, solo los proyectos móviles se financiaron a través de los programas Carl Moyer y la Proposición 1B. En los años posteriores, la financiación incluyó proyectos de origen estacionarios y proyectos que abordan estrategias incluidas en programas de reducción de emisiones en la comunidad. Next slide.
The board adopted the Community Air Protection Guidelines for high priority projects in chromium plating facilities and schools. The board also recognized communities have different needs with a lot of variation. With this goal in mind, we expect these guidelines will have broad applicability, and we are taking action to quickly address the widespread needs of different communities. Community members told us they want to get funding for a variety of projects in their communities. For example, some categories we heard were emergency diesel generators, stationary source modifications, restaurants, road paving, vegetative barriers, also fuel cell and battery storage, to name a few. To address all these diverse needs, we had to develop a process by which new categories can be quickly developed. Next slide.
El Consejo de Recursos de Aire de California adoptó las directrices de incentivos comunitarios de la protección del aire para proyectos de alta prioridad en cromo y en escuelas. El Consejo también reconoció que las comunidades tienen diferentes necesidades que pueden tener mucha variedad. Con esta meta en mente, esperamos que estas directrices podrán tener aplicabilidad amplia y estamos tomando medidas para rápidamente abordar las necesidades extensivas de varias comunidades. Los miembros de la comunidad nos dijeron que quieren obtener financiamiento para una variedad de proyectos en sus comunidades. Por ejemplo, algunas categorías que hemos escuchado son generadores de diésel de emergencia, modificaciones para fuentes estacionarias, restaurantes, pavimento de calles, barreras de vegetación y también el almacenaje de pilas de combustible de hidrógeno y baterías. Para abordar todas estas variedades de necesidades, tuvimos que desarrollar un proceso por cual se pueden desarrollar rápidamente nuevas categorías. Next slide.
There are a number of goals we have for this process. The main one is to provide flexibility to address community concerns. Of course, as we address the needs of the community, we need to know how the projects will be funded, what benefits are expected, and how much money is needed to achieve those benefits. In the interest of making things happen quickly, we recognize the need for flexibility, and there won't be a formal cost-effectiveness limit at this time. But of course, we'll gather information from these projects that are funded, and that data will be available to help communities and other decision makers in the future. We also want to make sure the process provides greater flexibility for supporting the measures and approved community emission reduction programs for the selected AB 617 communities. Next slide.
Hay una serie de objetivos que tenemos para este proceso. El primer objetivo principal es proporcionar flexibilidad y abordar las preocupaciones de la comunidad. Por supuesto, a medida que abordamos las necesidades de la comunidad, necesitamos saber cómo se financiarán los proyectos, qué beneficios se esperan y cuánto dinero se necesita para lograr estos beneficios. En el interés de hacer que pasen las cosas rápidamente, reconocemos la necesidad de flexibilidad y no habrá un límite formal del costo efectivo en este momento. Claro que vamos a acumular información de los proyectos que reciben fondos y esa información será disponible para ayudar a las comunidades y otros tomadores de decisiones en el futuro. También queremos asegurarnos de que el proceso brinda una mayor flexibilidad para apoyar las medidas en los programas de reducción de emisiones comunitarias aprobadas para las comunidades seleccionadas por la Asamblea 617. Next slide.
Another goal for this process is to ensure that all relevant statutory requirements are met up front. AB 617, the budget appropriation, and other statutes all put forth conditions that need to be considered. There must be a public process to ensure that community voices are heard. We have to quantify the emission benefits and other ancillary benefits, and we have to make sure the funding goes where it needs to. For the stationary source projects, emission reductions will need to be quantified along with other associated benefits with the projects. On the other hand, there are other benefits identified in community emission reductions programs, such as noise reduction. Those may not need to be quantified in the same way or to the same extent as emission benefits, but we need to acknowledge that the funding is providing these additional benefits as well. I talked about these benefits on the previous slide also. All of these goals are interrelated because they work together to make sure communities' needs are addressed and statutory requirements are met. Next slide.
El segundo objetivo de este proceso es garantizar que todos los requisitos legales relevantes se cumplan primeramente. La Asamblea 617 y la asignación presupuesta y otras leyes establecen condiciones que deben ser considerados. Debe haber un proceso público para garantizar que se escuchen las voces de los miembros de la comunidad. Tenemos que cuantificar los beneficios de emisiones y otros beneficios complementarios. Y finalmente, asegurarnos de que todos los fondos lleguen a donde tienen que ir. Para los proyectos de origen estacionarios, las reducciones de emisiones deberían cuantificarse junto con los otros beneficios asociados con los proyectos. Por otro lado, hay otros beneficios identificados en los programas de reducción de emisiones de la comunidad, como la reducción de ruido. Es posible que no se cuantifiquen de la misma manera o en la misma medida que los beneficios de emisiones, pero debemos de reconocer que la financiación también proporcionará estos beneficios adicionales. También hablé sobre los beneficios en la diapositiva anterior. Todos estos objetivos están interrelacionados porque trabajan juntos para garantizar que las necesidades de las comunidades se cumplan y que los requisitos legales se sigan. Next slide.
Everything must also be transparent and help ensure accountability. To accomplish this, CARB and the air districts are tracking the dollars spent, benefits expected, cost-benefit analysis, the recipients that have received funding, and the location of the projects. Next slide.
Este es el tercer objetivo, que requiere que todo el proceso sea transparente para asegurar responsabilidad. Para lograr esto, CARB y los distritos de aire están siguiendo el dinero gastado, los beneficios esperados, el análisis del costo y beneficio, los destinatarios que han recibido fondos y la ubicación de los proyectos. Next slide.
So how do we propose to meet the goals to add flexibility and help fund the projects that you want? Communities will be able to collaborate with air districts and determine what projects will address the needs of the community. The collaboration is an opportunity to create a greater impact in the communities. After the project needs have been established, the air district will develop a project plan which will contain a specific criteria to fund those project categories. The development of project plans will be done in the collaboration with communities and CARB. Next slide.
Entonces, ¿cómo proponemos cumplir con estos objetivos para agregar flexibilidad y ayudar a financiar los proyectos que ustedes quieren? Las comunidades podrán colaborar con los distritos de aire y determinar cuáles proyectos solucionarán las necesidades de su comunidad. Esta colaboración es una oportunidad para crear un gran impacto en su comunidad. Después de que se hayan establecido las necesidades del proyecto, los distritos de aire desarrollarán un plan de proyecto que contendrá los criterios específicos para financiar estas categorías de proyectos. Next slide.
What is a new category project plan? We're asking the basic information needed to meet the goals we already discussed. It is by category so that communities and districts can apply this broadly to multiple projects once it has been approved. The initial items on the slide are things the community and the air district will want to determine, and it may vary by community. Air districts will need to develop a set of criteria for each category of project the community and the air district have targeted as a priority. Benefits may include emission reductions, toxic exposure reduction, and any other benefits that will result from the projects. Quantification benefits are generally more technical, and we expect much of the technical work will apply across communities. This offers opportunities to collaborate and take advantage of existing procedures and information such as the Chrome and schools chapters in the CAP guidelines, which provide examples of what the project plan should look like. We will discuss the roles of the community, the air districts, and CARB in forming these project plans in the next few slides. Next slide.
De pronto ya se han hecho esta pregunta, pero ¿qué es un plan de proyecto de nueva categoría? En este plan de proyecto estamos pidiendo la información básica necesaria para cumplir con los objetivos que ya hemos discutido. El plan de proyecto es por categoría para que las comunidades y los distritos puedan aplicar esto ampliamente a múltiples proyectos una vez que ya haya sido aprobado. Los elementos iniciales en la diapositiva son cosas que la comunidad y el distrito quieran determinar y pueden variar según la comunidad. Los distritos de aire deberán desarrollar un conjunto de criterios para cada categoría de proyecto que la comunidad y el distrito de aire hayan señalado como prioridad. Los beneficios pueden incluir reducciones de emisiones, reducción de exposición tóxica y cualquier otro beneficio que resulte de los proyectos. Los beneficios de cuantificación son generalmente más técnicos y esperamos que gran parte del trabajo técnico se aplique en todas las comunidades. Esto ofrece oportunidades para colaborar y aprovechar los procedimientos e informes existentes como los capítulos de cromado y escuelas en las directrices de CARB, que proporcionan ejemplos de cómo debería ser el plan del proyecto. En las siguientes diapositivas discutiremos los papeles de la comunidad, el papel del distrito de aire y CARB en la formación de estos planes de proyecto. Next slide.
Collaboration is critical. The community has a very important role in the development of project plans. This is an opportunity for the community to determine what concerns should be addressed. Then there's an opportunity for the community to identify project categories to target those areas and work with the air district to prioritize those projects. The discussion on this slide is critical, particularly for those communities developing a community emission reduction program or those that already have an approved community emission reduction program. Because project plans are broad and allow multiple projects to be funded, communities will need to collaborate with their air district to set the priorities of individual projects. Next slide.
¿Cuál es el papel de la comunidad? Primero que todo, colaboración es algo crítico en este proceso. Su comunidad tiene un papel muy importante en el desarrollo de los planes del proyecto. Esta es la oportunidad para que su comunidad determine qué preocupaciones deben de abordar. Luego hay una oportunidad para que la comunidad identifique categorías de proyectos para apuntar y esas áreas en esas áreas y trabajar con los distritos de aire para priorizar proyectos. La discusión sobre estas diapositivas es crítica, particularmente para aquellas comunidades que desarrollarán un programa de reducción de emisiones en la comunidad o aquellas que ya tienen un programa de reducción de emisiones de la comunidad aprobado. Debido a que los planes del proyecto son amplios y permiten la financiación de múltiples proyectos, las comunidades deben de colaborar con su distrito de aire para establecer las prioridades de los proyectos individuales. Next slide.
Air districts will need to work with the community to establish project category priorities and describe the process by which the community showed support for both stationary and community identified categories. Statute indicates that funding may be used for programs that local air districts develop with community input through a public process so long as they are consistent with the actions identified in the applicable community emission reduction program. We'll be referring to these as community identified projects. We strongly encourage the air district to begin discussions with CARB during project development. Air districts will need to identify or develop quantification benefits with the help of CARB staff. We want to note the air districts have expressed concerns that some of the requirements in the process as presented is too onerous. We want to acknowledge that concern and note that we are prepared to evaluate the process itself as we proceed to meet the goals identified earlier of flexibility, statutory compliance, transparency, and accountability. Finally, the air districts will need to ensure the project plan is complete. Next slide.
¿Y cuál es el papel del distrito de aire? Los distritos de aire tendrían que trabajar con la comunidad para establecer prioridades de categoría de proyecto y describir el proceso cual la comunidad mostró apoyo tanto para las categorías de origen estacionarias como para los proyectos identificados por la comunidad. Estas leyes legales indican que los fondos se pueden utilizar para programas que los distritos de aire locales desarrollan con el aporte de la comunidad a través de un proceso público, siempre que sean consistentes con las acciones identificadas en el programa de reducción de emisiones de la comunidad aplicable. Nos referiremos a estos como proyectos identificados por la comunidad. Nosotros le recomendamos a los distritos de aire que comiencen las discusiones con CARB durante el desarrollo de este proyecto. Los distritos de aire tendrían que identificar o desarrollar beneficios de cuantificación con la ayuda del personal de CARB. Y los distritos también tendrían que garantizar que el plan del proyecto esté completo. En nuestras comunicaciones con los distritos de aire, ellos han expresado su preocupación de que algunos de los requisitos en el proceso tal como se presentan son demasiado onerosos. Nosotros queremos reconocer esta preocupación y tener en cuenta que estamos preparados para evaluar el proceso en sí mismo a medida que avanzamos para cumplir con los objetivos identificados anteriormente de flexibilidad, cumplimiento legal, transparencia y responsabilidad. Next slide.
CARB will work with air districts to expedite the development of new category project plans. CARB strongly suggests air districts to work together where common interests exist, especially in the area of quantification methodologies. As previously discussed, using existing tools may expedite this process. We hope this collaboration will streamline the process, which will help communities more quickly in multiple areas of the state. Our job is to ensure the new category project plan will meet statutory compliance. Once a new category project plan is approved, it will be posted on CARB's website. This will provide a resource to help communities make determinations on what priorities they want to pursue. Next slide.
¿Y cuál es el papel de nosotros en CARB? En CARB nosotros trabajaremos con los distritos de aire para acelerar el desarrollo de nuevos planes de proyectos. Sugerimos que los distritos de aire trabajen juntos donde exista un interés común, especialmente en el área de las metodologías de cuantificación. Como se discutió anteriormente, el uso de herramientas existentes pueden acelerar este proceso. Esperamos que esta colaboración optimice el proceso que ayudará a las comunidades más rápidamente en múltiples áreas del estado. Nuestro trabajo en CARB es asegurar que el plan del proyecto cumpla con el cumplimiento legal. Una vez que se aprueba el plan del proyecto, se publicará en la página web de CARB. Esto proporcionará un recurso para ayudar a las comunidades a tomar decisiones sobre cuáles prioridades quieren perseguir. Next slide.
Although I've touched on parts of the evaluation process in the previous slides, I want to go over the main parts of the process. As mentioned earlier, CARB will review the project plan for completeness and statutory compliance. If needed, CARB will ask the air districts for additional information. Once an air district has submitted a complete new category project plan, CARB will approve or deny the plan within 60 days. Our goal is not to deny plans. We hope to confer with other agencies where the expertise is so that we can get the plans approved in order to provide resources to communities as soon as possible. CARB will post approved project plans on the Community Air Protection Incentives webpage. Next slide.
Aunque he discutido partes del proceso de evaluación en las diapositivas anteriores, quiero repasar las partes principales de este proceso. Como se mencionó anteriormente, CARB revisará el plan de proyecto para verificar su integridad y cumplimiento legal. Si es necesario, CARB solicitará información adicional de los distritos de aire. Una vez que el distrito de aire haya presentado un plan de proyecto de nueva categoría que esté completo, CARB aprobará o negará el plan dentro de los 60 días. Nuestro objetivo no es negar planes. Esperamos consultar con otras agencias y utilizar su experiencia para que podremos aprobar los planes con el fin de proporcionar recursos a las comunidades lo más antes posible. CARB publicará los planes de proyecto aprobados en la página web de CAP. Next slide.
Once CARB approves a project plan, that category type is available for funding. Communities and air districts can then decide which individual projects within that category type to fund. Following that, air districts can select and fund projects with the normal CAP public process. Next slide.
Una vez que CARB aprueba un plan de proyecto, los distritos y las comunidades podrán financiar estos tipos de categorías y podrán decidir qué proyectos individuales dentro de estos tipos de categorías financiar. Después de esto, los distritos de aire podrán seleccionar y financiar proyectos con el proceso público normal de CAP. Next slide.
So what happens next? We will discuss and address comments we have received and any other comments you have now. It is our goal to implement the proposed chapter as soon as possible so that communities can fund these projects. We encourage communities to begin discussions with their air districts to begin the process of developing categories that will address local needs. Next slide.
¿Qué pasará después? Primero discutiremos y responderemos a los comentarios que hemos recibido. Nuestro objetivo es implementar el capítulo propuesto lo más antes posible para que las comunidades puedan financiar estos tipos de proyectos. Le pedimos y alentamos a las comunidades que comiencen las discusiones con sus distritos de aire para comenzar el proceso de desarrollar categorías de proyectos que aborden las necesidades locales. Ahora quiero pasarle la presentación a la señora Tina Díaz para que continúe. Muchas gracias. I will now turn it over to Ms. Tina Díaz to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. So I want to mention to the public that we made our proposed process available for public comment for 30 days. We want to hear from communities. We want to make sure that we provide a path forward to address the community needs and the community concerns quickly. As we mentioned during the beginning of the presentation, we recognize that there are specific needs in the communities across the state that are very unique to that specific community. And our goal is to implement this process as quickly as possible following our decision today. We want to initiate the review of the project categories so that districts can start funding these projects. However, if there is a concern on the process that we outlined, we want to hear from that. We want to hear from the communities and we want to hear what those concerns are. We prefer to delay the implementation of the process to address those concerns that you have. And I think I mentioned that at the beginning of our presentation that our goal is to start and implement this process as soon as possible, but we do want to hear from you. And that's in essence what I'm reiterating at the moment. Le quiero mencionar que pusimos nuestro proceso propuesto por 30 días para comentarios al público Y también queremos oír de las comunidades. Queremos escuchar cuáles son sus preguntas. Si tienen, sabemos y indicamos eso al principio de la presentación, que estamos conscientes de que las necesidades de las comunidades son muy diferentes en todo el estado y queremos estar seguros que escuchamos esas necesidades. Estamos dispuestos a, como mencionamos ya, a implementar este proceso lo más pronto posible después de nuestra presentación. Queremos que los distritos empiecen a fundar los proyectos de las comunidades, pero también es necesario que si hoy hay inquietudes en la comunidad de lo que hemos presentado, que compartan esas inquietudes con nosotros y nos digan cuáles son, porque es preferible para nosotros detener el proceso para estar seguros que estamos poniendo sus inquietudes, las que le estamos poniendo atención para que se arreglen. Antes de que empecemos el proceso de las preguntas, tengo que hacer un recordatorio que lo hice al principio de la presentación. Before we open the presentation for questions, I want to make sure that everyone is now familiar with your screen. As you notice that it has features of a chat box and also a feature of raise your hand. So if you do want to raise your hand, we ask you to please, if you do want to ask a question, we ask you to please raise your hand in the screen. But we do also want you to be aware that we have over 250 participants that register for this webinar, and there's at least over 200 that are listening. So we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask a question. We ask that your questions, of course, are clear and concise, and we also ask that you identify your name and the name of your organization. If you're calling using the teleconference, you will only be in the listening mode. We recommend that you participate via the web, the GoToWebinar, the desktop, etc., on your phone or tablet. However, if you are unable to reach us through those means because you have technical difficulties, then we do have an email address available for you to send your comments post our presentation. Antes de que abramos la presentación para recibir sus preguntas, quiero hacer un recordatorio que mencioné al principio de la presentación. En su pantalla tienen una manera de hacer preguntas subiendo la mano y esa es la manera de que ustedes pueden hacer sus preguntas. Les pedimos que si van a hacer una pregunta, que se identifiquen con su nombre y el nombre de su organización y que también hagan su pregunta clara y para entender y poder dar la respuesta que les deben dar. Si están llamando por teléfono, les pedimos que van a más bien solamente escuchar y no pueden hacer esas preguntas si es lo que está ocurriendo o si tienen problemas de dificultades técnicas, pueden mandar su correo, sus preguntas por el correo electrónico que vamos a presentar más adelante. So I think that I'm going to pass it over to Wasim, who is the moderator for our webinar, who will be identifying or moderating the questions.
Thank you, Tina. So as Tina just mentioned, what I would like everyone to do is use the raise your hand feature that we have through the GoToWebinar. And my goal is to unmute everyone one by one. I'll go down the list. If you raise your hand, some of the folks have already typed in their questions, which is great, but we would like you to ask those questions. So if you can raise your hand, I will go down the list and unmute you and let you know when you are unmuted so you can ask your question. And if you raise your hand, you also can lower your hand. So if someone answers your question later on and you had your hand raised, you can click on the raise your hand feature and it will lower your hand as well. So going down the list, I will start off with Adam Munich. Adam, you are unmuted. Go ahead, ask your question.
My question is, what tools are you using to quantify the pollution? And if you have any of data, is it available somewhere?
Okay, so to answer the question of what tools we're using to quantify the emissions, we actually are utilizing the tools, the quantification methodologies that are through the California Climate Investments that we also develop as a tool to complement and assist the air districts, and those are published as well in our website, specifically for the categories that are already within the community air protection guidelines for the categories listed there, which are for schools measures as well as for Chrome. But those, again, are tools that are posted as resources within our website. But in addition to that, there are already published quantification methodologies to the California Climate Investments website within CARB. And if you send an email later to the email that we're going to present towards the end, we can send that hyperlink to you if you want us to send it.
Thank you for that. So now we will go to our next question. And the one thing I do ask is when I unmute you, please just state your full name and any organization that you represent, so we have that as well. The next person up is Jana. Jana, you are unmuted. Go ahead, ask your question.
Hello, hi, my name is Jana Marino. I am just a resident within the city of Brea, California, and our property backs up to Site Drive, which is used as an access road 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for oil and gas production and hauling from the Brea Olinda oil fields. So this goes on, adjacent, basically, on our street, backside of our property backs up to North Site Drive on a continuous basis. Diesel-operated commercial vehicles hauling hazardous waste, natural gas, oil, what have you, equipment for drilling and such. I have done some research in the past few months and was able to find that the company that purchased the oil fields there from Lynn Properties, the name escapes me right at the moment, in approximately 2016 or 17, who operate that now are doing, they're really gung-ho. They're doing a lot of work. That's quite obvious. I hear it and see it routinely, just by the traffic, because like I say, they use site as an access into those oil fields. Not that that is the only access, but it's, of course, the access that affects us directly in this neighborhood. What my question is, why I'm here is because I'm looking to see if I could do anything to make a difference in slowing them down. They have regularly applied for new permits to drill new locations, new wells, and I've spent hours digging up that paperwork, and apparently everything is just streamlined through on the basis that was pre-existing ongoing work from prior to the laws that went into effect to protect the environment sometime in the 1973, 1976 time era. Well, and also within those statements, when they do give the approval for everything that they ask, these oil companies ask for, they're stating that there's no obvious environmental effects or ongoing detrimental effects to the environment. And that's absolutely not true. I want to know I'm here because I'm looking to find a way to help get this slowed down to make a difference in controlling the air quality within my neighborhood. Also, my second question, if you don't mind, is how can I apply to become an air quality measurement station, to have something perhaps put on our properties that would regularly measure the air quality to basically find out what the real effects are of this ongoing traffic for the oil and gas production. That is all I have. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for your question. If I capture it all, the specific issue of the community of where you reside in Brea, California, which is here in Southern California, my recommendation for that is for us to put you in contact. I don't know if you have done that already, but to put you in contact with the local air district, which is the South Coast Air Quality Management District that has jurisdiction over that area. And actually they're in Diamond Bar, they're not that far from Brea. And perhaps we can provide you with the specifics, perhaps points of contact within their compliance area where you can reach out to them as far as the permitting efforts that you mentioned earlier. I'm not as familiar with that, but I'm sure that some of what types of permits that facility gets and the frequency of their operation of during the 24-hour operation, for example, or things like that. But I would say that a resource for us is to put you in contact with someone from the local air. And that also addresses the second question that you asked, how can you get monitoring in that area within that? And I think that is the same thing, that the local air district would be someone that we can send you to as a resource where they would assist you or answer those questions. I do know that there are monitoring stations that we as a state agency, or as CARB also has in there, and I'm not as familiar with the specific locations of where those are, so I can, again, we can also send that additional information for you, should that be something that already exists, and we can point you in that direction.
So right now, Ivanka, you had typed in your question. Instead of me reading your question, I would like to unmute you. So you are unmuted. I know you're self-muted, so if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. This is Ivanka Saunders. I'm with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability out of the Fresno office. I'm part of the first year 617 program, and I'm a little confused of how this plays into year one communities. My question was, how will these updated Chapter 6 guidelines affect year one communities that have the emission reduction plan? We already have our emission reduction plan approved by CARB, or am I totally off base and this has nothing to do with year one communities? And if it does have something to do with them, are we able to then go in and change different type of community priority programs that we wanted to see?
Ivanka, the question that you asked, how does this chapter have to do, or what does it have to do with year one communities? Actually, it has a lot to do with the year one communities that were selected to develop a community emission reduction program. The first two chapters within our community air protection guidelines that were published, that were adopted by our board in 2019, are those that are already published and posted on our website. Those are only addressing stationary filters for Chrome facilities as well as schools facilities. What we presented right now is an additional chapter that we would add to those guidelines that would cover a broad list of projects, a variety of different projects across the state and in those communities. So specifically, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there may be some measures within your community emission reduction program that has been approved by your board and our board that are not the traditional, for example, those that would be under the guidelines that I mentioned just a second ago. So this provides an opportunity for the district and the communities to collaborate to find out how you can fund, or they can fund, some of the projects identified in that measure, stationary or community.
Okay, thank you, Tina. Next, we have Jesse Jesse, you are unmuted. Again, please state your full name and any organization that you represent. You are unmuted, Jesse.
Okay, my name is Jesse Marquez. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition for a Safe Environment in Wilmington, California, which is in the Los Angeles community. I want to address a couple of things that are specifically ARB and AQMD actions that can obstruct the progress of a community SERP project. And I'm going to give you an example. CARB and the AQMDs on a regular basis approve EIRs for projects. We want to have the assurance that you do in fact review these projects, and any project that will have a net increase of any category of emissions, you cannot approve that EIR. Because here we are trying to reduce emissions in our community, and then here you are, your different divisions, such as your marine division, your truck division, whatever division, they're rubber stamping EIRs, you know, and projects are going forward. Now, this may also include Title V permits. So we want to make sure that your team, when they review these EIRs, are specifically looking at AB 617 community projects that have been identified as priority for emission reductions. So that's number one. Number two, both CARB and AQMDs cannot approve or amend a rule or regulation that would exempt a category of emissions or a category source of emissions. An example of that would be CARB approving the at-birth rule, where the staff was proposing the exemption of bulk loading ships. Well, bulk loading ships is an emission source. So we don't want any rule or regulation coming into effect or being amended that's going to allow an exemption in a category that's been identified as a priority in a SERP project. And then the third item is that for CARB and its oversight of the expenditure of funds by AQMDs, validate that the project was in fact approved by the CSC committee in that community. We are already aware where AQMDs have diverted funds from AB 617 to pay off other projects and things, actions they had to reduce emissions in other categories, but never went through the AB 617 process. There are also situations where AQMDs are approving funds, for example, to approve equipment, which we know they need, but that equipment, such as air monitoring equipment, may not have been a priority of the CSC committee. So we want to make sure there's some way to account that the community is in fact approving the budget expenditures in certain categories, and that we should be allowed to see that in advance of submitting the request for funding or the application for funding, you know, whatever those requirements are. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, for that comment. We will certainly make sure that we will relay those messages and concerns back to our other colleague divisions within CARB to ensure that they do the proper follow-up that needs to be done to ensure that they specifically collaborate or ensure that it's identified in strategies for 617 as just mentioned. So we will follow up and relay that message.
Okay, thank you for that. Next up, we have Jim Kennedy. He asked a question, so I'm going to unmute Jim so you can go ahead, ask your question. I know you're self-muted. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Jim Kennedy with the Healthy Air Alliance, and this is very exciting that there's this opportunity to create new categories. And I'm wondering if this was spurred on by a need that CARB or local AQMDs saw and may already have a list of potential categories that they're looking to create. These would be good examples in helping local CSS see the process and start moving forward. If they've already identified at that high level what local communities might be doing more, then maybe that can seed the pipeline of these types of new categories. So I was wondering, does CARB or any of the local AQMDs have examples of what new categories they'd like to see.
So we've mentioned that, well, thank you for your question. We mentioned that at the beginning of our presentation that when we approved our community air protection guidelines in May 2019, those guidelines were specifically to address stationary sources. And those stationary sources we mentioned were for chrome plating operations and for school measures. The new category that we are discussing today does to address additional sources of stationary sources that are otherwise not covered by chrome facilities or school measures. So as far as the list, that project list that may be available, when we presented our guidelines to our board, what we heard from some of the air districts as well as from the communities is that there was more flexibility that both needed, both the air districts and the communities, to add other categories that are more necessary for their local needs across the state. So in terms of that list being available, you mentioned that you are with the Healthy Air Alliance. Perhaps one of the things that I can offer as a suggestion is that you can visit some of the air districts within the state that have selected communities that are developing a community emission reduction program. And those, for one of the callers already said, they mentioned one, and that is communities within South Coast. There's 3 of them, and within San Joaquin there is a couple, and there's one in the Bay Area, and others under monitoring. So very quickly, I can tell you that in South Coast, there's the Wilmington community, the San Marino Muscoy, and the Boyle Heights East LA community. They should have those, and in fact, they have those already posted and available on the websites. And the same thing with the San Joaquin Valley. They have South Fresno, as well as Shafter, that is also approved by their board and our board, and that's already public.
Yeah, but on their categories?
So I think that if you want to kind of take a look at what those project lists are, those are good resources for you that I can point you to.
Okay, so the next question we have one more person with a hand raised, and then go to William Coons. You are unmuted. Please introduce yourself. You're self-muted, so please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, fine, thank you. So hi, I'm William Coons, and I'm a member of the AB 617 Community Steering Committee for the Carson, Wilmington, West Long Beach area. I would like to voice my concern with one area of pollution that doesn't seem to get any attention. And to give you an example, it's the small equipment pollutions that are occurring. I found, as an example, it was an AT&T trailer that was running a generator to keep power onto a phone panel near a mall. Well, because they were working on it, or it was damaged, or for some reason, and it was severely polluting, extremely giving out a lot of white smoke too. So white smoke and pollution was coming out, and so I reported this, and nobody wanted to could do anything about it. And when I reported at the AQMD, the Southern California Air Quality Management District, AQMD, they said because it's under, I think the number was 49, it was under 50 horsepower, it did not need to be registered, or they could not indeed do anything about it. I even called AT&T, and they said they'd have somebody check on it. But my point is this. Apparently there's a registration if you're over 50 horsepower You're not required to register it. You're not allowed to. I mean, you are allowed to pollute any amount. That means if we had lawnmowers all over the state polluting, they're all under that amount. We would have a serious problem with pollution from lawnmowers. So I would like to see CARB or even the state pass new regulations or change this to where it can cover small engines that are highly polluting and contributing to the pollution in our area. Thank you.
So I can try to address the comment that was made, and that we heard it clear that there is a potentially a large number of small engines that are perhaps that need our attention. So, we will, what I can say on that is that that is something that we are coordinating as well with other folks from our colleagues within CARB and trying to strengthen the process for the small off-road engines as well. You did mention something specific to a trailer and AT tools and the like, and the process, the registration process or the permitting process, typically some of those may again under the local air district, but we can certainly also potentially coordinate or engage our folks from enforcement if we need to follow up on that. I want to make a point before we ask, Scott, were you able to unmute yourself? Or let's see, were you able to unmute him? We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
He's unmuted, but it looks like he's having some difficulties with his microphone.
Okay. I did want to make a point before we take any other questions. I want to make a point for the audience. I think it's really important and critical that if we didn't make our message clear during our presentation, that I try to make it clear right now. The process that we have in place right now that we are presenting, this process is specifically to identify or to assist stationary source projects, as we mentioned earlier, like the potential these stationary diesel engines or cement plants or boilers and things like that. Those are examples of what we are considering stationary sources may be unique to specific communities around the state. And then so the community identified projects. There is that distinction, and you've heard us mention that several times during the presentation. Community identified projects are those that likely already made it into an approved community emission program for those communities that already have an approved CERB. So that's a big distinction that I want to make sure the audience understands, because those community identified projects are what we are doing through this process is to be able to provide that mechanism and flexibility so that communities in their districts can collaborate and fund those projects. Scott, did you want to add anything else to it?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Sorry about that. Obviously, folks, we are doing our best to adapt to the new normal, and definitely appreciate everyone's patience with this. We do feel it's important to continue the process, to get your input, your feedback, your suggestions on how we can better meet the needs of these communities. With regards to the most recent commenter, as I think Tina covered pretty thoroughly, the regulatory aspects of the issues you face are really not in our wheelhouse. But this proposal that we have today does provide an opportunity for communities and air districts to basically develop those incentive programs where regulations are not enough to be able to address some of these sources. I want to make a point that perhaps was not as clear earlier as we had hoped. While the community identified projects are specifically to enable those communities with the community emission reduction programs, sometimes referred to as SERPs, but we try not to use the acronyms because it gets a little confusing. But those communities like Wilmington have identified their priorities, and the proposal we have in front of folks today is intended to allow funding to be used to further those priorities. And that's what we're calling the community identified projects. So in that sense, if these are indeed one of the priorities that have been identified that is called out in the SERP, there would be that mechanism to go after these and clean them up using an incentive program developed by the Air District in collaboration with the community. With regards to other communities who do not have community emission reduction programs, they've not been identified as 617 communities. There are still the opportunity to develop incentive programs to reduce stationary sources, and those opportunities really can be offered to all communities to benefit. So there is this bifurcation, if you will, there. And I'm kind of taking advantage of your question, sir, to make that point that there are these differing levels of opportunities, but we recognize that the selected communities have a greater, they've been identified as having this more immediate, greater need, and hopefully can also serve as models for other communities moving forward. Thank you. And I'm probably not going to mute myself for fear that I would lose it altogether. So I apologize if I'm sneezing or sniffling. It's not that, it's allergies, but they are rather annoying, sorry.
There are a couple of easy questions I just want to ask that I don't have to unmute folks. Joshua Abraham was asking, can I find the presentation online? And the presentations are attached to this webinar, and they are available online. And the second question someone was asking, Jonathan Pruitt, will the recording be available for viewing afterwards? So I'll let Tina answer that question.
Yes, the recording will be available after our presentation. It is being recorded.
And then Ivanka also had a question. She asked for a deadline for comments.
So we have had it, I mentioned that as well, that we have had this available for 30 days. So we want to make it implemented as soon as possible. I mentioned that as we concluded as well, that if you see any major concerns with what we have presented, that you let us know. There is also in our website like a one-page summary that we summarize the stationary sources and the community identified projects, so that you kind of have a better, in a one-page document, a summary of what we are trying to discuss here. So as far as there is the deadline to submit comments, it's as soon as possible. Today, tonight, tomorrow, maybe next week, as soon as possible. But we really want to move forward with implementing this document and ensuring that the air districts start funding projects.
Give me 1 second. So Mimi's question was, He has no mic, so he's asked for me to read the question. His question was, who implements community identified projects?
So once again, the community emission reduction programs that select the communities under Assembly Bill 617 are either A, implementing or are developing. Ultimately, the implementation we're going to occur through the air districts. The air districts ultimately are the ones that are funding the projects, but it is done in collaboration with the community. So, Scott, did you want to add anything else to that?
I think you captured it all. I would say that certainly by the how the legislature envisioned community identified projects and these incentive funds in general, even those used in other communities that have not been identified, they did envision the air districts implementing them. That actually makes a lot of sense in that the air districts have the the expertise, the infrastructure, years of experience implementing other incentive programs such as the Moyer program, and allows for a quick and efficient rollout of projects. Obviously, everybody involved would like projects to happen more quickly, and certainly both ourselves and the folks at the air districts are definitely dedicated to making that happen, both in general and specifically with regards to these projects.
Thank you, Scott. Checking on time, we're about 33 minutes away from 6 o'clock, so we're doing good on time. And I'm looking at questions. We don't have any other questions typed. So if anyone else wants to make any comments or raise your hand, please do so. I believe I've called everyone that's raised their hand or asked a question in the questions pane. So we'll give it just another minute or two for folks to either raise their hand, or if they're having audio issues, to type in their question, then I can ask that question for you if you are having audio or mic issues.
And I will take advantage of this opportunity, to again, tying it back to what I just said, we do want to roll out these opportunities as quickly as possible. And we recognize that we are breaking new ground with this program, in that we are, instead of having the very extensive guidelines that other incentive programs have, like again the Moyer program, and I'll pick up my copy of the guidelines. We are really trying to empower communities and the air districts to be able to develop these stationary source and community identified project categories as simply as we can, while still meeting our goals, our mandates of flexibility for the communities, meeting the statutory requirements, both of AB 617 and of the greenhouse gas reduction funds that are being used to provide these benefits to communities, and transparency and accountability. And so we are attempting to balance that. We are, as I believe we mentioned earlier, air districts have been talking to us about how we can better streamline the process. We expect those discussions to continue. We want to look at the process and figure out what is needed, what works, how to make it better. because we know there are so many different needs from different communities, and it's hard to have a one size fits all. But we believe that it is important to start the process quickly, if at all possible. Get the guidelines for the process out there so we can start testing it, figuring out, approving categories so communities can get the projects that they need to clean their air, to improve their communities, rather than wait and try to nail down every single detail and basically have the result be that communities have to wait even longer for projects to happen. So that's kind of a preface to reiterating something that Tina had brought up earlier, which is, if there is a showstopper, if there is such a major concern that we really need to hold on to this and rethink and wait because we're not, hitting the mark enough, we want to hear that from you. We hope that's not the case. We hope that we will, leave this meeting with people saying, yes, get it out, make the projects happen. But ultimately, it is the communities, the residents of those communities that we need to serve. And in this case, we're hopeful that we can start serving them very quickly, but with the recognition that we intend to continue to try to improve the process moving forward.
Thank you, Scott. Mike Laybourne had a quick question. His question was, when will the recorded version be available? And my guess is, go ahead, Tina.
Sorry. My guess is I should be available within the next 24 hours, correct, Wasim?
Correct. We just got it downloaded and yes, edit some of the times where we started late. So I'll take out the blank time and we'll try to get it ready for posting tomorrow.
And then just for that question, it would be posted under resources within the Community Air Protection webpage incentives.
Correct. Going down the list, trying to see if there's any other questions that are asked or anyone else has their Todd DeYoung. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. You had your hand raised and now you are unmuted. Please go ahead and ask your question or comment.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Perfect. Loud and clear.
Okay. Sorry about that. Good afternoon. My name is Todd DeYoung. I'm the Director of Grants and Incentives for the San Joaquin Valley Air District. Scott, Tina, Derek, everybody at CARB. Just wanted to thank you for all the hard work that you guys have put into this chapter. I know it hasn't been easy, and I know you guys are balancing a lot of different priorities. From our perspective, we definitely want to continue the work that we've done so far to ensure that there is a streamlined process and to ensure that we can get these funds out to these communities. Our air district does have 2 first-year communities, and now we're working with a year 2 community as well. And so implementing a lot of these strategies that have already been adopted and approved is going to be critical here in the very short term. So you have our commitment to continue working to make sure that we have a process that's that meets all the goals of the legislation and the intent of the program, and really does everything that we can to expedite getting this funding out. So again, we appreciate the work that you guys have done, and we look forward to continuing to work with you to expedite that process to the extent that we can. I've just had one super quick question, and I apologize if I missed it earlier. This does not have to go back to the CARB board, correct? Do you have the authority to to implement this chapter as soon as it's approved, or did that get delegated to the executive director?
Yes. Essentially, when we went to the board last year, one of the things the board did, recognizing the need for quick action and recognizing the very large diversity of sources and needs that different communities had, they delegated to the executive officer the ability to make changes and add categories as appropriate. And this is essentially an example of using using that authority to ensure that hopefully we add many categories. I think you mentioned you have 2 year 1 communities that already have SERPs, and I know San Joaquin has an fantastic incentive program, but yeah, this authority has been delegated. We would not need to return to the board. We are likely to make some small modifications to the draft language that's out there based on some feedback that we've received, and our goal would be to finalize it in a form that people, I say finalize, it's really the start of the process. Get the guidelines in a form that we can start developing those project plans and make projects happen.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Karen. Give me a second to find your name really quick. Karen, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. This is Karen Schmelnick from the Bay Area Quality Management District. I also want to thank and recognize all of the CARB staff. I know you guys have been working on this for months, if not years. Also recognize all of the effort from the communities. We've heard of some earlier today, and there's many that aren't on the line or not necessarily making comments, but they're actively listening and participating and engaged in trying to help improve air quality in their communities. In the Bay Area, we have one community that has completed its SERP, the West Oakland community, and then also Richmond that is in the process of working on that. It's a monitoring community currently, but there's many other communities, and I think we've heard from some of them today that will not be working on SERPs. It's not possible for everyone to go through. So I just wanted to ask the question just to clarify 2 things. So Scott, also I really appreciate your explaining that it looks like there's going to be some more updates to the guidelines based on input received. So I just wanted to know, in terms of timing for SERP communities or for communities that are scheduled to go through the SERP process, can we start developing plans now as air districts, or should we be waiting till the guidelines are finalized before we can get started? And I only ask because it will take a while for us to develop these plans, and then I understand that there's a 60-day review process. So, obviously we're all interested in working together to move these unique projects forward. So that's one question. And then the other one, there was another gentleman earlier that I think asked the question. So just to clarify, so for other communities that are not part of the SERP process, we can still apply the stationary guidelines to other communities in our region that aren't going through the community emissions reductions plans. Is that correct?
Let me answer your second question first. That is correct. Project categories developed for stationary sources can be used in basically throughout your region. They do not have to be in CERP communities or communities that are, I'm sorry, I shouldn't use CERP, community mission reduction program communities or communities that are developing those programs.
Okay.
For your other question, I had to stop myself from saying, yes, please start as soon as you can, even while you were asking the question. We definitely want to see real life examples, work through them as much as possible. As I mentioned earlier, one of our goals is to, as we go through this process, is to kind of look at the process itself. How can we make it work better? Are we asking for the right things? Are we asking for the right level of detail? We all want to get these projects approved and out there and delivering the benefits to the people in these communities. And so we are more than willing to work with care districts and communities as these plans are developed. We have we will approve or deny within 60 days. As Derek mentioned and Adriana mentioned, we have no desire to disapprove anything unless it's not meeting those requirements. Our goal is to have good plans, approve them, and offer additional tools to the communities in the air districts to address the needs of those communities. So I want to make sure because of that, we don't necessarily want to make a lot of changes to the draft that we currently have out there. We are considering some to emphasize those 4 goals that we talked about in the presentation, to sort of serve as not a goalpost, but to basically remind us that as we look at them, those are ultimately what we're trying to achieve, and that where we can streamline, we want to. But we don't want to hold this up for another month to worry over whether the commas are in the right places and things like that. We want to start the process, and we definitely, that can start as soon as you want to get in touch with us and say, hey, here's what we're thinking for this stationary source project or this community identified project category.
Okay, thank you. That's great, and we look forward to getting the final and getting started. Thank you.
Thank you.
Going down the list again, I'm not seeing any questions, but let me go back up one more time. I do want to say thank you to everyone that attended, and Tina will close it out once we don't have any questions, but with all the audio issues, it is difficult to do these webinars and these interesting times we're in, but I appreciate everyone being patient. Scott and Tina, I'm not seeing any hands raised right now. We'll wait another minute or so. Or do you want to, Tina, go ahead and take over? Actually, there's one more person that just raised their hand. Molly Johnson, you are unmuted. Right now you're self-muted, so please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question. Let's give them.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
This is Molly Johnson with the Placer County Air Pollution Control District. And to follow up on Karen's question, I am wondering, it wasn't clear to me in the draft language, if a district is intending to use any of the stationary source categories, including reducing air pollution in schools and the new Chapter 6 will they be required to submit the project plan? Or is that only for districts with designated communities and that are required to submit the community emission reduction plan?
Well, there seems to be a continued confusion amongst the stationary and the community identified projects. So let me see if I can answer your question first, and then I'll try to explain the difference between both again. So the stationary project category will be available to all of the air districts across the state that receive community air protection incentive funding. So that's any district from southern, the U.S.-Mexico border all the way up to the northern part of the state that receive the CARB incentive fundings. With regards to the specific question on air filtration and the need for the submittal of a project plan, yes, the project plan is a new category for both, for the stationary as well as the community identified project. So if you have any projects for air filtration that are outside of the scope of the existing schools measure that we have in our guidelines, then there is the opportunities to submit that project plan for the air filtration. One example that we mentioned when we started the presentation was, for example, air filtration in community centers. If that was a need for that community and for that air district, that is an example of a stationary source in those areas with stationary sources where that do not have a community emission reduction program. Before I pass it on to Scott, I want to make sure that I once again make the attempt to clarify the difference between both. So the Assembly Bill 617 for the first year, they selected 10 communities in the state of California. Of those 10 communities, 7 were selected to develop a community emission reduction program, and 3 were selected to develop a community air monitoring program. So that first year, the next phase for them was to, work through their community and the community committee to develop their community emission reduction program. And within that program was to identify all of the measures to address air pollution that was for that specific community. So when we keep on mentioning that is in the community emission reduction program, is specifically for those 10 communities. Subsequent to the first year, we have another round of communities that have been added, and they are now in the process of developing those community emission reduction programs. So this chapter also applies to them. For example, in the San Joaquin Valley, we have the community of Stockton. They are developing a community emission reduction program because they are a selected community, or the folks in the East Lake Coachella Valley or within the South Coast Basin, as they develop the community emission reduction program for their community, they can utilize the chapter that we are, chapter 6, for both stationary as well as community identified projects. So I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Scott.
No, I don't think so. Is Molly, did you need anything additional?
No, that answered my question. Thank you.
Okay.
We're about 11 minutes out, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. Let me scroll through the list again one more time. So if anyone has another question or comment they would like to make, please raise your hand.
We certainly welcome your feedback, and you know, want to be able to take into account your comments, your priorities, your concerns as we move forward with this. I do want to thank everybody for their time, and especially for their patience with my inability to make my microphone work. And again, you know, we're in unusual times, and need to try out new ways of doing things. And I very much appreciate that everybody was able to join us, and hopefully everybody who wanted to have a question or make a comment, you know, we still have 10 minutes or so, so please feel free.
Tina, I'm not seeing anything. We'll wait, I guess, for a few more seconds, and then I'll turn it over to you for the closing remarks. Yeah, no questions or comments or hands raised.
Can we have the next slide, please? Adriana? Right, so I want to reiterate what Scott mentioned earlier, and extend our thanks to the audience that has endured us for the last couple hours, and also for the communities across the state. We understand that there may be some additional questions that you may have, and we have a dedicated email address for you to submit your comments or a question that you may have, and that's what's on your screen now. I also want to thank, you know, the collaboration that we have with the staff within our agency, and the staff within our branch. It does take an effort, a team effort, to put something like this together, specifically during these times of uncertainty. So thank you to the team, and to those of you that have helped us to get through the point where we are today. I think what I'll like to just mention before we conclude is to let the audience know something that I did not mention at the beginning of our presentation, and that is that the webinar is recorded and will be posted as a resource in our website, as I mentioned earlier. And then before I conclude, I also want to let the public know, and the audience know, districts and other members that are interested in finding the resources that we have available, and those are the quantification methodologies that we have put together to support the air districts in communities as a tool that is available as well within our website in the resource tab. So I think with that, I will pretty much say we have about 6 minutes or so left, but we are available through that email to receive additional questions. And if no one else has any other questions for us right now, I think it's fair for us to conclude the webinar. And thank you everyone for your participation.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and hope everyone stays safe wherever you are. Take care.